Tonight we're going to be starting to look at a series of lessons from the book of Ecclesiastes on the true meaning of life. And this is number one, really starting with the first chapter. We live in a time when everyone longs for happiness and satisfaction. It's what we're looking for. How can I find a little happiness in life? How can I find a little satisfaction in life? Well, the world strives for this in different ways. Number one, education, wealth, pleasure, work. Yeah, some people look for pleasure in work. And really work can be rewarding and can be pleasurable if that's what if you're in a particular field you want to be. It can be tiresome if you're not. It's really amazing how that works out. But if we love our work, then we'll get through it. Yeah, we'll enjoy it, and we'll be happier people for it. But there are many people who are filled with disbelief, disillusionment, and despair. Well, how do they get that? Well, they see that college is a way to find happiness and satisfaction, but they don't have enough money to go to college, or don't have the temperament to go to college, don't have the stick-to-itiveness and whatever. Some people, find it in money or wealth. And I don't have any problem with that. I don't have enough money to make me wealthy, so it's just, you don't have to worry about that. Look for pleasure, but we look for pleasure in life, and what happens? There's sadness all around us, isn't there? Bad things happening, bombings in New York City again. It's just amazing that what's going on in our world. We're not going to find it in this world. And how about work? What is there? Half of the people in the workforce, or half of the people who are eligible to work, either don't or can't. They don't work, or they can't find jobs, or they're it's an amazing thing that. So how can you find happiness and satisfaction in the way that the world is today? Well, many are asking, what is the true meaning to life? Some are asking, is happiness really attainable? The founding fathers of our nation thought it was. The pursuit of happiness was guaranteed in the Constitution. But what is happiness? What do they mean? Well, it meant, like we were talking about with work, that people have a right to do what they really want to do and be happy in their work, and not have somebody telling them, hey, no, you can't do that, you got to do this job over here that you don't like, that you'll be miserable at. So people who are happy are generally people who are productive also. So in the book of Ecclesiastes, we have recorded one man's search for happiness and true meaning to life. See, Solomon begins with a popular premise about life. A popular premise about life. Now, Ayn Rand started a whole movement about 50, 60, 70 years ago. And one of the things she based her philosophy on was that there are absolutely no contradictions. If you're looking at something, studying something, you come up with a contradiction, you need to go back and check your premises, because one of your premises is wrong, or your premise, the whole premise is wrong. And that's the only way you come to truth. There are no contradictions. Something cannot be and not be. However state you want to put it out there, that's how it simply is. This pew cannot be, the cover on it cannot, it's either blue or it's not blue. I'll put it that way. And there's that's no contradiction there. Now, the devil's good about contradiction, isn't he? God said to Adam and Eve, at the time you eat that fruit of that tree, you shall surely die. And the devil said, you shall not die. He produced a contradiction there. Adam and Eve went with the devil's premise instead of going with God's premise and listening to God. And that's how we get into the mess that we're in. So Solomon begins with a popular premise about life. See, I'm not sure that we understand the book of Ecclesiastes as God has written it. God, the Holy Spirit, has inspired it. Because we'll pick out snippets of things and say, look, that's the truth. So the premise that he's looking at is the worldly premise, all right? Not God's premise, but he's going to look at that, he's going to test that as a hypothesis for what brings happiness or the true meaning of life. And this is that popular premise that life is meaningless and vain. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. So is that true or is that false? You say, wait a minute, that's in the Bible, it must be true. Well, it's true that that's what the world says. And it's true that Solomon said that, and Solomon said, I'm going to use this as my hypothesis to understand the meaning of life. But it's not true. And that's where the conclusion in the book of Ecclesiastes, that's where Solomon takes us to the conclusion. So Solomon's gift to us is the ultimate object lesson for listening to God rather than to our own wisdom or to Satan's wisdom or to the world's wisdom. Listen to what God has to say because God's premises are always true. Upon the death of David, Solomon was appointed king in his father's stead. And he entered his kingship with deep reverence and a spirit of humility as he communicated with God. You probably heard this story a dozen times, if not 100 times. Solomon prayed in 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 7 through 9. And he's, 12 years old at this time? Just a very young man. And now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of David my father, although I am but a little child. I do not know how to go out or come in. Hey, you talk about humble? That's the way we ought to be. I don't know how to do. There's so many things in life I don't know how to do. And it can be scary. Okay? And your servant is in the midst of your people, whom you have chosen, a great people too, many to be numbered or too many to be numbered or counted for multitude. Solomon says, you've got a chosen people here, and they're great, and you're making me king? Whoa, and I'm just a little child? Verse 9, give your servant therefore an understanding mind to govern your people, that I may discern between good and evil, for who is able to govern this your great people? Shouldn't we all be praying for that? The ability to discern between good and evil in all things. So what did God do because of his reverence and his humility? God gave him wisdom. 1 Kings chapter 4, verses 29 through 31. And God gave Solomon wisdom and understanding beyond measure, and breadth of mind like the sand on the seashore, so that Solomon's wisdom surpassed the wisdom of all the people of the east and all the wisdom of Egypt, for he was wiser than all other men, wiser than Ethan the Ezrahite, and Heman, Calcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahal, and his fame was in all the surrounding nations. God did something great because of his reverence and his humility. And that's shown in Solomon's concept of what a righteous king should be like. Psalm 72, verses 1 through 8. This is a psalm attributed to Solomon. Give the king your justice, O God, and your righteousness to the royal son. May he judge your people with righteousness and your poor with justice. Let the mountains bear prosperity for the people and the hills in righteousness. May he defend the cause of the poor of the people. Give deliverance to the children of the needy and crush the oppressor. May they fear you while the sun endures, and as long as the moon throughout all generations. May he be like rain that falls on mown grass, like showers that water the earth. In his days may the righteous flourish and peace abound till the moon be no more. May he have dominion from sea to sea and from river to the ends of and from the river to the ends of the earth. Now it's talking about Solomon as king, but it's talking more about Jesus as the Christ, the Messiah who was to come. But oh, if we had leaders like this in our nation, man, that supported God and used the wisdom of God and prayed for and spoke toward the righteousness of God, wouldn't we be a greater nation? Oh, yes, we would be. So Solomon was a great king who cared for God, and he cared for God's people, because he starts out like this. He was a man of wisdom and deep spiritual devotion, but something terrible, horrible happened. Solomon strayed away from God. See, he prayed for wisdom to judge the people. He should have asked for some wisdom to judge himself along the way. So that came a little bit harder for him, didn't it? It came harder. He still had to do it, but it was harder. He had to work at it. So how do we account for the wise and humble king falling away from God? The easy answer is, well, it was women, right? It was women. It was the women's fault. They were the blame. It was all those wives and those concubines and all. Well, that's just an easy answer, isn't it? Most of the time, the easy answer is not the proper answer. It's the surface. It's not what's down there, kind of at the bottom, causing things. So the true answer is found in 1 John chapter 2, verse 16. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and the pride of possessions is not from the Father, but is from the world. He looked away from God, and he looked at the world. And he said, I'm the king, and I can have all these women, and I can have all these riches, and I can do all this stuff because God chose me. And God isn't going to let me go. Well, he was wrong about that, wasn't he? He became a degenerate immoralist. Ecclesiastes 2:10. And whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil. That was the work of his own hands, say. And this was my reward for all my toil. Hey, I worked hard. I deserve to have a little sin in my life. Yeah, see? So you can see, going back to 1 John 2:16, the desires of the eyes and the pride of possession and the desires of the flesh. Lust of flesh, lust of the eyes, and pride of life. His foreign lives did turn his heart away from God. I think at the beginning it was, hey, I'm the king, I've got to make treaties with all these kings around me, and you know, if we have these intermarriages going on, well, then they'll have to respect me, and you know, these kings over here, they won't want their grandchildren to suffer, and they will come and attack us and whatever. Now, when has that ever happened? When has that ever been a reality? But that's the way the world looks at it. That's the way probably the United Nations would look at it, and certain political party looks at it, because they want to bring all those people that hate America to America. Wow. Well, that's a different story for a different time. But you see what goes on, what happens. His large harem was a transgression of all conceivable bounds. 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 1 through 8. Tells about what he had, you know, about the things that were going on. And, you know, God told them, you don't intermarry with the heathens. He wanted Israel to be separate and apart. He wanted them. Now, listen, that's not what he says about the church, is it? It's not what he says about the church. What he says about the church is, if you're going to marry somebody who believes in God. somebody that has like understanding as you do, because it's going to be better off for you. But if somebody wants to marry a Chinese person or a Japanese person or whatever, there's nothing really wrong with that. But the minds have to have a common meeting ground. So Solomon did this, and he didn't have common meeting grounds because all these women wanted to bring their idol gods to Jerusalem. And finally, he relented, and he built temples for all these heathen gods in Jerusalem so that they could rival the temple that he had built for God in Jerusalem. Now notice the response to this in Kings 11, 9 through 13. And the Lord was angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. Man, if God appeared to me one time, I think I would, probably wouldn't, because I'm a human being. Okay? But here's Solomon. The Lord appeared to him twice. And he still does this. And had commanded him concerning this thing that he should not go after other gods, but he did not keep what the Lord commanded. Therefore the Lord said to Solomon, since this has been your practice, and you have not kept my covenant and my statutes that I have commanded you, I will surely tear the kingdom from you, and will give it to your servant. Yet for the sake of David your father, I will not do it in your days, but I will tear it out of the hand of your son. However, I will not tear away all the kingdom, but I will give you one tribe to your son, for the sake of David, my servant, for the sake of Jerusalem that I have chosen. Now, this comes after Solomon's death, when his son Rehoboam is made king, and Jeroboam, son of Nebat, causes a rebellion, takes 11 of the 12 tribes with him. That becomes Israel, the northern kingdom. Judah's left alone. Later on, Benjamin comes back. And that's why you have the 10 tribes up in Israel and 2 tribes in the south. Just a little bit of history. It hasn't caught up to that in the text yet. It'll do that later. Solomon had missed the true meaning of life, hadn't he? Because he was seeking for happiness and satisfaction in the ways of the world. Now the term or word Ecclesiastes had as its immediate meaning the assembly speaker, that is, the preacher. And in chapter 1, verse 1, look at it and see what it says, the preacher. Most of the newer translations will say that. In the Septuagint, which is if you see that LXX there in fine print somewhere in a note or whatever, that's a Septuagint. That's when the Hebrew text was translated into a Greek text about 200 years before Jesus was born. And it's translated Ecclesiastes, that's where we church. So he's talking about the church in the Old Testament, which was Israel, to a degree, the assembly or the church. So it's not conceivable to think that this whole book, save verse 1, which is kind of a introduction to an introduction, is a sermon delivered by Solomon to the assembly of Israel. Solomon doing the preaching. Very old age, and here he says, this is what I discovered. Chapter 1, verses 2 through 11 serve as a scripture reading. Can you imagine that? Having that scripture. Here's what's going on. And verses 12 through 15 serve as the introduction. Chapter 1, verse 16 through chapter 12, verse 12 serves as the body of the sermon. But it doesn't take that long to read it. You just read the sermon, you probably do it in about 40 minutes. It's 12 chapters. It wouldn't take long just to read it, but we can't just read it, can we? We've got to break it down. We've got to try to understand it. We've got to analyze it. Like Ezra and Nehemiah did. They sat and they would preach for 4 hours, and they'd give the scripture, and then Ezra and Nehemiah, Ezra in particular, would give the meaning of it. And those people would stand for 4 hours to hear the sermon. And chapter 1, verse 15 serves as the thesis statement. Okay? And Lance and I were talking about thesis statements and sentences and all this morning. And it's very simple. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. But again, that's in the world's way. That's in the world's way. That's not in God's way. Because in God's way, great things can do. God can do things that are impossible for man to do. So we have to keep that in mind. So Solomon is speaking of this fallen world in which we live. This fallen world does not produce perfection in human beings. It's not designed to. It can't do it. There has to be something working on us from outside this world to take away the sin and make us whole again. Once we sin, we lose something that this world cannot ever return to us. We lose our innocence. Only God's forgiveness can return us to a state of innocence. Thus, we see that Solomon has a very important message for us. The world isn't going to give it to us. The world can't give it to us. The world doesn't possess it to give it to us. This is a fallen world, and that's why we've got to look to the other realm. We've got to look to the heavenly, and we've got to look to God's way if we are to be redeemed from this slavery to sin and death and the world and Satan. There are several valuable lessons we can learn from the book of Ecclesiastes. Okay? First of all, we can try to ignore the important questions of life, but death will make us face them. Solomon was an old man when he wrote this. He was getting older, and he had done all these things, and all of a sudden he figures out, I've done wrong. I need to get back to God. Here's the whole meaning of it. We'll get to that in a moment. But see, we try to ignore it. We ignore what we see right out there in front of us. This fallen world, see, sin is around us. It's rampant. It's there, and it's so easy for us to get caught up in it if we're not careful. Death is there. The opposition to God and to God's Word and to the church and to Christians is there. We've had our eyes closed to it for a century. Not us individually. We find that, we're a Christian nation. Well, maybe not. Our nation was founded on some Christian principles. That doesn't mean everybody in it's Christian. And you look how many people are trying to, how many people ignore God. So death will make us face those questions of life. And that's the thing, the sadness, to get to that point where you know death is coming, and then wonder, was my life worth it? Did I do anything for anybody else? Solomon had to look at that. Solomon had to say, I was just eaten up with my own lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. He failed. He failed in a huge way. That doesn't mean he was defeated. Secondly, death is a judge who questions the worthiness of our lives. Once again, we're going to stand before Christ in judgment to receive of the deeds done in the body, whether they have been good or whether they have been bad. Not our intentions. What is it? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. My intentions were to do good. Did you do good? Well, I intended to, but I just never got around to it. That's the person who's going to be saddest on the day of judgment. I knew to do it, and I intended to do it, but I didn't do it. It's what we do. That's what we're going to be judged by, not what we intended to do. So death is a litmus test, indicating the quality of the way that we have lived. Can you imagine if there was no death? What would we be like? What would we be like in this fallen world if there was no death? We'd be like the ranters back at the time when Calvinism originated. They just, oh, hey, you know, if all we have to do is name Christ and confess Christ and say that we're saved and God will take care of us, and we can't lose our salvation, hey, let's just be like the world. Go back and read about the ranters. Man, I tell you what, they were something. How ridiculous. Death is a knife that divides the world into the fearful and the unafraid. Right? The remorseful and those at peace. The angry and the accepting. And the hopeless and the hopeful. And we want to be hopeful. That's where we want to be. We want, when that time comes and we ask that question, we can look back and say, you know, I may not have been perfect, but here are some of the things that I did for God, for the church, and for my fellow human beings. Solomon in Ecclesiastes is a man facing death. He is old, and he can see all too clearly that his time is short. At first, Solomon is obsessed with death. And when I say obsessed with death, that's back at the beginning. Once again, he's angry and he's fearful. He's angry with God. I'm the king. Why can't I live another 40 years? Why can't I just live forever? Why do I have to die? Well, again, if there was no death, we'd have no qualms about just being like the animals out here, doing whatever we wanted to do. And he's fearful, and he should be fearful, because he's lost. He's separated from God once again. To him, death is not just a defeat of the physical body, but of all the hopes and dreams and ambitions of life, because he started off so well. He started off as David's son. Can you imagine that? Now, David wasn't a perfect man. You want to learn about worship? You want to learn about spiritual living? Study the Psalms. Study the Psalms. Study what David says. You want to learn about philosophy? Study what Solomon says. You want to learn about law? Study what Moses says. It's there. God's book is complete. He's angry and is fearful. To him, again, it's a defeat. Because man dies, nothing in life means very much at all. You're just going to get up in the morning. I heard something the other day on TV. I forget where it was that I heard it. You know, Amish people are pretty happy, aren't they? You know what the Amish people do? They get up in the morning and they work. And then they eat breakfast. And then they go do some more work. And they eat lunch. And they go do some more work. And they eat supper. And then they go do some more work, and they go to bed at night. And they get up the next morning, and they go to work. And they only do take off really one day, and that's their Sabbath, and they call it. And they're pretty much a happy people. And I said pretty much, I don't know totally. But there again, they understand what life is about. And they're taking care of business, and taking care of themselves, and they're taking care of their families. But see, life has meaning, even if it's just work. It's not vanity for them. And that's why he starts off with that statement, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. But that's the way the world looks at it. It's true, that's the way the world looks at it. And it's true that if you have no relationship with God, that's what your life is going to be, but that's not what it has to be. And that's what Solomon is trying to get across to people, is this premise is wrong. It's wrong. If one cannot come to grips with death, he can never come to grips with life. We've got to come to grips with death. It's coming. Ecclesiastes has to do with three fundamental questions. Number one, why am I here? I don't mean here. I mean, where did I come from? Why? What's my purpose in life? What is the meaning of life is the second one, say. If life has no meaning, so that's what the evolutionist teaches, isn't it? We're just accidents. We're accidents of evolution. We have no purpose. We're destroying the earth. So we got to kill babies. And we got to stop, building power plants and using fossil fuels and all this stuff because we're just destroying things. That's not life. That's not life. How can I be happy? And in the true sense of happy, more so blessed. As the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes, teaches us. So this book challenges every popular notion of what leads to fulfillment and the good life. Every one of them. Because what was spoken of by the world in Solomon's day is the same thing that's spoken of today. What people yearn for in a worldly sense. Solomon says there's nothing new under the sun. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 9. Is that true? Well, to a degree. But you could be a new creation. We can be new creations. And that's you're not going to get that from the world. You get that from God. It's one of the most relevant books in the entire Bible for the society that we are living in today. If we read it correctly, if we understand it in its context, if we're just pulling snippets out of it and saying, well, that's what the Word of God says, you'll miss it. The beauty of the book. So the message of Ecclesiastes is very simple. You've probably heard it all before. I think there's a sign in the window that has something to do with this also. Life without God is pointless. And that's where the vanity of vanities, all of vanities is a life without God. A blessing. We're going to look at some more of this, Lord willing, in the next few weeks. So keep that in mind. Hey, if you have need tonight, let your request be made known as we stand and sing the invitation song.